Crimson Desert exclusive preview from IGN first. This just dropped. Shout out to Diego and chat for letting me know. Just dropped all of what is happening? Dude, this YouTube redesign is freaking me out. 33 minutes ago. Let's see what they have to say. Brand new gameplay. Let's check it out.
It has been almost 6 years since Crimson Desert was first revealed to the world. Across that period, developer Pearl Abyss has shown off a huge array of ideas, mechanics, and boss battles. It's frequently been cited as something of an everything game. An open world adventure with sky islands, mechanical dragons, wrestling moves, interdimensional gateways, interacting elemental effects, and even a Spider-Man web swing. But the more that's been revealed, the more there's been the sense that Crimson Desert may be a lot of pieces in need of a whole. Finding that complete picture was my main objective when I visited Pearl Abyss's studio in Seoul for this month's IGN First. And while I can't say I found it yet, multiple hours of hands-on playtime has revealed a game that's maybe not as strange as you'd expect. In fact, Crimson Desert feels pretty straightforward. Pearl Abyss has crafted a reasonably traditional open-world adventure, made up of multiple regions peppered with towns, outposts, and castles. There's the usual collection of main and optional quests, plus classic distractions like fishing. You'd be forgiven for not realizing this though. Pearl Abyss has put almost all of its promotional efforts into showcasing boss fights. Not only that, but Crimson Desert's blend of traditional medieval fantasy with sci-fi and steampunk elements does make it seem like it's been pulled in several directions at once.
In order to destroy such a weapon, you'll need to acquire Golden Star's power core.
Golden Star.
When you're on the ground and seeing how all these elements interact though, it doesn't feel quite so alien. The continent of Pywell is perhaps less like a typical Tolkien-esque fantasy world and more akin to Dungeons & Dragons, a setting that, in recent years, was host to a Mad Max-like vehicular chase through hell. Pearl Abyss's design team explained that they wanted Pywell to reflect the variety of our reality, in which some countries feel much more futuristic than others, and note that some of Pywell's leaders may be more resistant to the advancement of technology than others, a conflict that'll be explored through various faction quests. All this means that the variety doesn't feel artificial or there simply for the sake of being wild, even when you're at the controls of a flying battle robot, which was, of course, designed by Dwarven engineers.
I do think the closing act of this game's marketing cycle is going to be really interesting because a lot of people are really impressed by it. A lot of people think it looks too good to be true at the same time. A lot of people think that it looks like, as he said, the everything game. But how do you close the deal? How do you close it to the point where you get them to spend $70 or whatever, version of the game they end up buying, getting them that excited? Maybe it's just with really good review scores where people can see it. But I think as of right now, people are still not clear on what an hour or two of gameplay will be like. When you boot this game up and you just sit down to play for a couple of hours on a Tuesday night, what are you going to be doing? With some games, it's much easier to understand what that will be. Whether it's something like Outer Worlds 2, you understand you're going to be doing these side quests or the main story quest lines, trying to infiltrate this area, building up your relationship with your companions, this, that, and the other. With this game, we've seen big set pieces, we've seen boss battles, but I think the quieter moments have not really been explored much, which I don't blame them. Quiet moments can be more boring than the exciting moments and the big moments with boss fights and stuff. The danger with only showcasing and advertising with the big moments though is that people start to think that that's all the game is, which no game can be nonstop boss battles. I mean, even big games like Elden Ring have a lot of variability. It has moments of quietly riding through a vast valley with not much going on, admiring the vistas and finding little bitty scraps on the ground, and then they have the big boss fights as well. But there's that variability in it. So I want to see some of the quiet moments. I want to see some of the moments where not a lot is happening, That's what I want to see.
The inclusion of these mechanized and steampunk elements grant Pearl Abyss the creative license to build quests that are a significant departure from anything we'd see in something like Skyrim. A major part of my hands-on time involved completing a quest for Marnie, a scientific genius who cloned his own consciousness to create an AI-like entity called Hall. Naturally, the results of such an experiment have gone very wrong, and Marnie's evil digital magic twin has taken command of a flying fortress that's terrorizing Pywell's skies. Defeating Hall requires the use of a power core, which Marnie reveals is hidden inside a weapon called Golden Star. And by weapon, he means a giant mechanical dragon. While they presumably have ballistic missiles in Pywell, what with the advanced engineering and all, of course the fantasy version of a nuke is flying Mechagodzilla. All that stands between me and this winged menace is a fortress filled with angry battle robots. It appears that fortress assaults will be a significant recurring objective in Crimson Desert, considering that my hands-on time involved no fewer than 3 of them. I can see why Pearl Abyss was keen to show them off, as they are a showcase for some of the project's strongest achievements. There's a great sense of atmosphere, with a legion of men from either side battling the living hell out of each other, and you're caught in the middle of it all. Fun mechanical wrinkles add texture. During one attack, I was able to fire signaling arrows that were quickly followed by a bombardment of artillery, decimating enemy soldiers and reducing buildings to splinters.
That is the same thing that I experienced in my demo with the game back in June at Summer Games Fest. So I'm not sure if he's playing a similar chunk as what I played, but that signaling arrows thing is the same that I previously told you guys about.
In another, I was able to circumnavigate the brutal melee entirely, sneaking into the castle through a crumbling wall and using the prison as a shortcut to the boss. And in my fight through the robot fortress, a backpack-mounted EMP device allowed me to fry the circuits of both the lumbering ground threats and airborne bug bots in one giant blast. There's always something new to try, something to experiment with. But as much as these fortress assaults are a demonstration of Crimson Desert's highs, they also simultaneously reveal what could turn out to be some of its biggest blemishes. Battling masses of enemies is surprisingly tedious, feeling messy and repetitive rather than an engaging chain of frontline fights. An awkward lock-on feature pushed me away from one-on-one duels into a more freeform playstyle, but that came with the baggage of imprecise strikes and occasionally kicking the air instead of faces. Absolutely none of these issues hamper the boss battles, which was my only experience of Crimson Desert prior to this demonstration, and I was quite surprised at how different combat can feel in alternative scenarios, even when using the same moveset. It's in these
I will say the lock-on that he just brought up, that's something that I also brought up, if you remember, in my I Tried Crimson Desert video right after Summer Games Fest. And my understanding of how this works, there is a lock-on for your aiming, basically, for where the melee attacks actually go. And then there is a lock-on for your camera. And my understanding is that they are 2 separate things, or at least they were back in June. I don't know if that's changed or if they've updated it since then. But when I was describing how I was frustrated that the lock-on wasn't working properly in my demo, some of the people from Pearl Abyss actually came to me after that video went up and said, actually, there is a way to deal with it. It's just a particular input. So if you come back to our booth, we can show you how it works and all that. So there is apparently a fix to it. It's just, it wasn't clear to me. I didn't understand it when I was playing the demo. So I don't know if this is a similar problem where he was having problems with the lock on and it's because the controls just weren't very clear to him, or if it's still a problem that they need to address. But lock on has certainly been a consistent complaint or frustration from people who have tried the game, because at the very least, it doesn't work the way it works in most games that we are familiar with, where you press the right stick, it locks on both camera and attacks are locked onto that character or enemy. In this game, I believe they were describing that it's 2 separate lock-ons, so you can freely move the camera while being locked on for attacks on one character. It seems unnecessary to me, like just lock the camera as well, but I don't know, it could have changed by the time that they played it here, or it could change by launch. But yeah, that has been a consistent frustration from people.
Smaller, less refined details where Crimson Desert threatens to lose itself. There are occasions where you need to pick up and manipulate objects, such as planting a banner to inspire your allies. Doing so requires standing still, turning to face the object, activating a focus mode, rapidly tapping a button to lift your target, and then finally using your telekinetic powers to manually move it. All of this is a slightly baffling annoyance when erecting flags, but it turns into a genuine frustration in the middle of a boss battle, when you're desperately trying to swing a fallen masonry column during the precious few seconds when the boss is stunned.
This It's funny he's bringing this up because this is also a sequence that I played when I tried the game. But the problem was that the very nice lady who was helping me play it, that was from the team sitting next to me, she, like, I forget what the exact example was, but she basically was telling me press like L1 to do this like slam attack, but it was actually supposed to be L2. And so I was pressing the buttons and nothing was happening. And so we went through like 4 cycles of the boss getting downed before I finally was like, okay, let me try some other button inputs. And then I tried that and then I realized, oh, she just got the button name wrong, and then it worked. So I wonder if it was a similar problem that he ran into. But once I had the right buttons, it worked. It worked just fine. But yeah, it's amazing how you just have to have the right buttons and then it works great. But it's also one thing I think it's important to note with this game is that it's crucial to understand the control scheme is very complicated. This is not like your standard R1 light attack, R2 heavy attack, L1 parry / block. That is not what this game is. It is unapologetically way more complicated than that. And as a result, it's not easy to pick up and try. It's actually very difficult to pick up and just play if you've never played it before. But I think it's important to understand that because that's true of a lot of games as well, where if you aren't familiar with the control scheme or combos or things like that, popping into the middle of the game's runtime and then being like frustrated that you don't understand how the controls work and then therefore critiquing the game because of it, that also is not really fair, because if you play the game from the start, you will have that muscle memory built up. You know, if you've played Ghost of Tsushima, like the Iki Island expansion, you know how there's enemies that swap weapons, so you have to swap stances constantly. And if you have that muscle memory down, when the guy pulls out a shield, it's not that big of a deal for you to just quickly R2, swap the stance, and continue fighting. But if you had never played Ghost of Tsushima before, and then you got thrown into a boss fight in the Iki Island expansion, and you don't have that muscle memory, it's going to be very, very frustrating. And you're going to be like, it feels super clunky. It feels bad. How am I supposed to figure this out? Because you don't have the muscle memory. But if you played the game from the start all the way through, you would have that muscle memory and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. If anything, it would be engaging and exciting, you know? So I just bring that up because a lot of these frustrations over button inputs or control scheme stuff, it could be that even after 20, 30, 40 hours of gameplay, it's still annoying. That could very well be the case, but it could also be the case that if you play Crimson Desert from the start all the way through, you get this muscle memory down and then it's not a problem at all. And you're just, it's like second nature to you, and it's not a problem whatsoever. So I just want to bring that up because it's a common difficulty in games that have complicated controller schemes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is bad. Yeah, there it was. It's right back here. He lifts it up. Yeah, so put down, lock, carry, square, triangle, circle, and then I think slam was like R1, but she was telling me to use L1 or something like that. Oh, here it is. Aim with L1, slam R1. Yeah, so you have to pick it up, hold it, and then aim with L1 and then slam with R1. And I think she was saying L1, R2 or something like that.
Thankfully, no such awkward ultra hand juggling is required to extract the power core from Golden Star. As we explored earlier this month in our making of feature, this is a boss fight with a unique mechanic that must be discovered in the quite literal heat of battle. The dragon's flaming breath activates an array of pylons dotted around the arena, which then dispense EMP bombs that you can fire from an arm-mounted cannon. The system creates a repeating phase loop. Golden Star circles above, belching the flames that produce the EMP bombs that will eventually bring him crashing to the ground, where you can unleash a barrage of strikes until he reboots and begins the cycle anew. Polar Bears are keen to point out that you don't have to do this. You could, for instance, use lightning-reefed arrows to apply a stun, or simply chip away at his health bar with ranged attacks. But I feel that the real enjoyment in all of Crimson Desert's boss fights have been finding the unique mechanic built into the arena or even the enemy itself. Bosses are not the only thing in need of conquering. Suspended high above Pywall are a scattering of Abyss Islands, accessed through portals that are unlocked with mysterious Abyss artifacts. These islands appear to come in multiple guises. Last year we saw that one of them is home to an alchemist called Alastin and his Library of Providence, and my hands-on session included one that was more akin to Zelda's puzzle shrines. Its checkerboard floor was essentially a room-sized circuit board in need of a total rewiring, and finding the correct path through the grid of rotating flagstones unlocks the island's treasure trove. This is, of course, the sort of puzzle you've solved in everything from Watch Dogs to Bioshock, but I enjoyed how your equipment is integral to completing it. Your lantern illuminates the correct pathway, and your grapple hook is used to spin each tile. So while this challenge is not particularly taxing, I hope its solid foundations are the basis for more interesting puzzles that await among the clouds. When you've uncovered an Abyss Island's secrets, you can leap off the side and float down to Earth, where plenty more traditional open world fare awaits. There are towns to visit, in which you'll find shopkeepers to trade with and bounties to take on. Out in the wilderness, there are camps to clear out and roaming barbarians to slaughter. And then there's the factions. From what I glimpse in the menus, there are dozens and dozens of them, although some will be more important than others, I'm told. A few have their own quest lines, such as House Wells, a family of nobles led by a duke who's lost his castle to rebel forces, a situation that's the catalyst for one of those aforementioned fortress assaults. Pearl Abyss was quick to clarify that these groups are not like Fallout's factions, and allegiances with them won't change the course of the story or impact Crimson Desert's ending, which is set in stone. And so I'm left wondering, what are the faction quests in aid of? When asked, Pearl Abyss's design team explained that they were there to ensure that the factions felt like significant actors in the plot, and that they offered more content for players to complete. That considered, I am a little apprehensive that at least some of Crimson Desert's offerings will be stuff to do rather than meaningful interlinked opportunities. That brings us back to my very first question.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, as long as you understand what you're getting into. It's the same reason why it's important to understand if you're playing a game that is an RPG, like your expectations have to be in line. If you're playing an RPG and then you do faction quest lines and they have no impact on the story or relationships or anything like that, that's a problem. If you're playing like an adventure game and you do like Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, if you do side quests in that, like, yeah, that's not going to have an impact on relationships or on endings or anything, but it's something that you're doing to gain new equipment or materials or whatever, then that's totally fine. It's just a matter of understanding what you're getting into so that you don't have false expectations. Kappa Claus, thank you for 28 months. Booyah. Yo, hope you're doing well. Excited to try RedSec tomorrow, then Arc Raiders later this week. Yeah, dude, I'm ready for Arc Raiders. Me and my college buddies have been keeping an eye on it. Yeah, we're gonna actually do it. I was gonna play the freaking server test that they had last week or two, and I was gonna do it, but I was traveling, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna wait until the actual launch, and then get in. That's what I'm gonna do. So I'm excited. Anyway, continuing.
What is Crimson Desert as a whole? I know it's a vast open world with deep, fighting game-inspired combat that works better against bosses than it does against fodder. It's got spectacle-laden quests that take you from in-the-mud castle assaults all the way up to aerial dogfights. And it's littered with good-time distractions, from fishing and bounties to taming bears and buckling up in a battle mech. But I'm still waiting to discover the glue between all this that elevates an open world to new heights. Shadow of Mordor has the Nemesis system, which chains its enemies together into a foe-conquering big picture.
So good.
Red Dead Redemption 2's systems are united by a pursuit of realism and authenticity that makes its campaign feel like a life lived rather than a game played. And this year's Ghost of Yotai links every activity on its map to a new unlock on your skill tree, ensuring even little diversions are a growth opportunity. That's the stuff that's so far been missing from Crimson Desert's demonstrations, and the thing I hope will eventually be revealed when I get to play multiple consecutive hours rather than a collection of isolated quests and bosses. Without it, I still think Crimson Desert stands a solid chance at being an overall good time, but with it, it could become something much more special. For more from Crimson Desert,
Yeah, like what I'm looking for is I want to see what like the loot system looks like. What, like if I'm going out of my way to complete a side quest, what's the reward for that? You know, like what is the connective tissue that ties it together? And that's what we just don't know as of yet, because we've seen a lot of glimpses of boss fights, of castle raids and stuff, but we don't know, like I said earlier, the quiet moments, the moments of respite, of pausing, thinking, reflecting. What does my character build out look like? Swapping weapons. We see things like using food and consumables. How does that work in collecting them or crafting them? Like that type of stuff that is core to a video game, but that is much quieter than these big crazy boss fights. I think that's what people have yet to see. And I don't blame them for focusing on the big, crazy, exciting stuff. Obviously, like, it's big and exciting, but I do think that that's where the questions still lie. So we will, we'll see when we get a look at it, but I'm hopeful that they either do like a preview event where they let people play some more of it. What I've told everybody has been the best way to do this, in my opinion, is what Warhorse did with KCD2. What they did was they invited a few select people out to like big cities. In my case, they invited me out to New York City. I flew in, slept a night in a hotel, walked to a game cafe that they had, rented a room in, and then we sat down and I played 7 hours of the game nonstop from the start of the game. 7 hours, and then when I was done, I flew home. And that was it. They're like, yeah, just play 7 hours, have fun. Like, it was the most big dick energy, just like, yeah, we know we have something awesome here. Like, it was exactly what you would hope to see from a studio that's confident in what they have. That they were just like, play, have fun. That's it. We don't need to have carefully catered quest lines. We don't need to load you into separate states. We don't need to hide you away from this quest line because it's bugged or broken. We're just going to let you play. And I think that could go a long way with something like this. You just let players have 7 hours with Crimson Desert, see what they think of it, and share that, you know? That's what I would recommend to them. I'm not saying, I mean, obviously I would like the chance to play it, but it doesn't even have to be me. It just has to be somebody that you can trust is going to accurately reflect on what that first 6-7 hours of the game is like, you know? Time will tell. They have plenty of time. They've got months and months and months to share with this or to explore this, but yeah, we'll get there. He took my thing. Red flag.